Hi, my name is Rachel Taylor. I'm a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, and today I'm going to walk you through my personal health story. So if you've been struggling with gut issues, hormonal imbalances, sleep issues, cystic acne, you're probably going to relate a lot to the story I'm about to share with you. Okay, so if we backtrack, like hindsight's always 2020, if you've been dealing with any kind of chronic health issue, chronic health struggle, I feel like once you get to the other side, it's so easy to look back and connect all of the dots. And if I look back on my own journey, the seasons of my life that I've been through, if I look back on childhood, I was always the kid that was having tummy troubles. I was chronically constipated. It was so bad. I just remember as a little kid crying, not being able to have a bowel movement. My parents having to give me all sorts of over-the-counter medication to try and help me have just regular bowel movements. And it was a big struggle for me. And then I also remember just having what I would call a nervous tummy. My stomach just felt unsettled, queasy, and I complained about that a lot as a child. And I also was getting sick all the time. Throughout most of my childhood, it seemed like I was always catching something. And it would progressively get worse as I got older. And I didn't realize it at the time, obviously, as a child and a young adult. But this was the beginning of my gut story. And then if we look at high school, so by high school, I had daily stomach pain, daily bloating, just really uncomfortable. I just remember throughout high school having tummy troubles. So by high school, I had daily stomach pain and bloating. And then towards the end of high school, I started experimenting with diet. I have to give a lot of credit to a health class I took towards the end of high school. The teacher that taught this class was phenomenal. I was homeschooled. She taught this co-op health class and really opened my eyes to food and the quality of the food. She showed me what was in soda and what it can do to your body, what conventional processed wheat products are made of, and what that can do to your body. And I remember that's the first time a light bulb went off in my head, and I thought, could diet be contributing to my daily stomach pain and bloating? Like, I was really convinced that maybe this was the missing piece. So that's when I started experimenting with my diet. I cut out processed food, I cut out soda, I cut out pork, I started cutting out certain proteins, eggs, and eventually towards the end of high school, very early years of college, I even tried a plant-based diet because I had read a plant-based book that really talked about how conventional dairy, conventional red meat, and all of these different animal-based products can cause so much inflammation in the body. And I was so convinced that this must be it. So I even went plant-based for a while. And at first it felt great. Like, I just remember having a sense of lightness. I felt significantly less inflamed. And of course, looking back, it was most likely due to the fact that I cut out a lot of conventionally processed foods. But then after a few months of going plant-based, things started to really unravel for me. I developed intense anxiety. Certain foods would instantly trigger bloating and stomach pain, and I started to also struggle with insomnia. So I really started to struggle with my sleep a lot. I've always been a light sleeper, but I just remember it really started to take a turn for the worse when I couldn't turn my brain off, I couldn't relax. It took me hours and hours and hours to fall asleep. And then I would also sometimes wake up during the middle of the night, be wide awake, and not be able to go back to sleep for the rest of the night. I rarely got consecutive 3+ hours of sleep in a row. It was very broken. really started to impact my mental health. And then let's go into college. So college years is when my anxiety really ramped up. And that's a common thread throughout my own health story, is this snowball effect of my anxiety and mental health really starting to explode. And of course, college is such a pivotal time. So much is shifting and changing as a young person. Your perspectives are shifting. You have new social circles. So obviously there were a lot of external factors that were playing a part in my anxiety, but also health-wise, I believe a lot of the stuff going on with my body physically was also contributing to the anxiety. And that's when I realized this plant-based diet was not working for me. I just remember struggling so much with my mood, such a low mood, even very irritable, very angry, lots of anxiety. And so I switched to just a gluten-free, dairy-free approach. So I reintroduced animal-based proteins, but I still tried to stay away from most dairy products and most conventional gluten products. And this helped a little with the stomach pain and the bloating, and helped a lot with my mental health. I think just reintroducing animal-based proteins really helped my mental health. But then it's like another layer came on with my health. But then I started having really painful periods, PMS, really severe cramping, especially like day 1 and day 2. I just remember most of my high school, early college years, my period, my menstrual cycle didn't really faze me that much. And then I suddenly started getting really bad cramps when my period would start. I would have to have a heating pad. I would have to stay curled up in the bed. It was so painful. I was crying. I felt lightheaded, felt nauseous. And this was a new layer of symptoms that my body was trying to communicate to me, like, hey, we need attention here. And then let's go to post-college. I like to call this the breaking point. This is when everything, like the tip of the iceberg, like my body just started waving the white flag. So at the time, I was attending a college in the Central Florida area. And then I moved with my family to another state, moved to Alabama. And I was working as a veterinary technician full-time. That's what I had gone to school for. And I was starting my first postgraduate big job at a vet clinic. It was an hour away, so I had an hour commute from living in a very rural area to driving to a college town. And I had to work very long hours, so 12-hour shifts, indoors all the time. And this was an incredibly stressful job for me. I was very stressed. Commuting, living in a new place, having a very high intensity, high energy, high demand job, being the new person, it was just a lot. And I remember my anxiety, everything just started to come back, but tenfold. And this was the nail in the coffin for my health. This transition into this really stressful career was just too much. So now I want to talk a little bit about my acne. So I struggled with my skin, having pimples, a little bit of cystic acne throughout parts of high school, early college years, and I just addressed it through conventional skincare products. I remember at the time I did things like Proactive, benzoyl peroxide cream, harsh toners, really intense skincare products. And it seemed to address the acne, which was great because when you're in high school and college, you do not want to have to be worrying about your skin. And so it went away. But then after starting this really stressful job and transitioning to a new place, my acne came back so bad. Now I was a graduate from college at this time. So I was around 21, and this is not when you want to be struggling with cystic acne and bad skin. It was just so bad. And I went back to the products I had used before, the Proactive, the benzoyl peroxide creams, the harsh skincare products, trying all sorts of remedies externally, masks, homemade clay masks, all sorts of things, and none of it was helping. And so this is when it became pretty severe, really painful and uncomfortable and so embarrassing. My digestion became super unpredictable, and I was in survival mode. I was following a very restrictive diet, so rigid and disciplined, all whole foods. I remember going to a special health food store in the area near my job to buy all the ingredients I could to make everything from scratch from home. Everything had to be super clean, nothing processed, mostly gluten-free and dairy-free as much as I could. And that diet became my lifeline. If I ate anything outside of that really narrow list, if you have dealt with chronic gut issues, you can probably relate to the fact that you had a list of safe foods. And if you strayed off of that list of your safe foods, it was just game over. And so I paid for it immediately. If I accidentally ate something that was off the list, I became extremely bloated and had a lot of discomfort with my digestion, nausea, stomach pain, bloating. It was just the worst. Let's transition into married life. So I got engaged and things actually started to improve a little bit. At the time I got engaged, I moved from Alabama back to Florida where my fiance was living, and I started to notice some of my symptoms were improving a little bit. So I figured out my acne triggers, which I was highly motivated by the fact that I was going to be getting married soon, and the last thing you want is cystic acne, pimples, zits. You want to have clear, beautiful skin for that special day. However, my gut issues were still such a major struggle. I began experimenting with raw milk and raw milk kefir. So trying to get exposure to more beneficial bacteria, healthy probiotics. My mother-in-law made homemade kefir. She introduced it to me, and I really started trying to introduce some foods that I thought would help my gut. But the bloating and the stomach pain persisted. It continued to get worse and worse and worse. And at one point, I went actually to my gynecologist because my stomach pain was getting bad, my bloating was getting bad as well, and then also my PMS, my period pain and discomfort and symptoms related to hormones were getting really bad as well. And I was concerned, because I was going to be getting married soon and wanted to make sure everything down there was okay, and could I improve how I was feeling. And this was my first experience at being brushed off by a medical professional. I remember asking specifically when I went in at this appointment, I shared my health concerns and the issues I was struggling with hormonally, and she brushed it off and just said, everyone your age feels this way. It's pretty normal to struggle with this. And that was very discouraging for me because I was really hoping for something that would give me some relief. And I didn't want to go on birth control at the time, which is something she highly encouraged. And then after getting married, this is when things hit probably the lowest point for me in my health. My husband refers to this season as the dark days of Rachel, because I think as you can see throughout my story, everything is starting to snowball and one thing is building on top of another. But I started to feel terrible after every single meal. My little list of safe foods were no longer safe. Things felt very unpredictable when it came to my gut issues, my digestion. I just didn't know, am I going to eat this and feel horrible? I didn't want to go out to eat anymore. I didn't really want to go out to socialize because I didn't know how I was going to feel. I spent most of my time curled up on the couch. And at this point, I finally went to a family medicine doctor to get some things checked out. One of those was my thyroid, because I had been reading about some connections between a lot of the symptoms I was experiencing, the gut issues, the skin issues, the hormonal imbalances, the insomnia that was persisting. And I had read that it could possibly be related to thyroid. So I went to a family medicine doctor and had my thyroid checked. I had some blood work done. But the only marker that came back slightly elevated was an antibody marker. And I was told that based off of this lab work, there's really nothing I could do at this point, just to look into some supplements and maybe that would help. And granted, this doctor was so kind, so nice to me, but I also was left with more questions than answers, and I was really discouraged. And it was at this point that I decided, and this was through just researching online. I think you could probably relate to this if you're dealing with chronic health issues. I was always on Instagram, Google, at the time blogs were a big deal, YouTube. I was just looking up my symptoms and remedies for that and seeing if anybody else out there was going through what I was going through and had they tried anything and had it actually helped them. And so through my rabbit hole research, I came across functional diagnostic nutrition, functional health. And I connected with a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. And she listened to my story and listened to my list of symptoms I was going through. And she suggested that we run a lab, a functional lab called the GI map, which is a stool test. And I had never heard of a test like this before. I was also thrilled that I didn't have to go anywhere. I didn't have to go to a doctor's office. She sent the test kit directly to my home. I collected the sample at home and then sent the sample off, and then she had the results ready for me in a few weeks. And the results of this GI map were incredibly eye-opening. I realized as she walked me through these results, I had leaky gut. I had no immune function in my gut, so the mucosal barrier, the lining of my gut, the immune function there was almost non-existent, which explained why I would get sick all the time. I also found out I had very low stomach acid. I was not absorbing or breaking down fat very well, and this was due to H. pylori, which is an infection, a pathogen in the stomach that burrows in the stomach lining and reduces stomach acid. And this explained why I experienced so much stomach pain, why eating food was really unpredictable, and why I also was dealing with all the other symptoms as well. And I had really imbalanced gut bacteria, so the keystone bacteria you need to have in your microbiome, I had a lot of imbalances there. I also had opportunistic overgrowth bacteria, and then she also ran a Dutch hormonal test, which is a urine test, which looks at hormone metabolites, and found out that I had the testosterone levels of a post-menopausal woman. So at this point, I was probably around 25, and I had testosterone levels of somebody that was 50 plus. And that explained so much as to why I felt the way I felt. And that is the moment that everything clicked. I finally had a clear picture of what was going on inside my body. And I just remember getting the results back and crying because it was such a relief to know that it was not all in my head. And, all of this made sense. And this was a turning point. So now I'm going to share with you exactly what I did based off of my GI map results. So once I had answers, I had these functional lab results in front of me based on what was going on specifically inside my body, I now had something I could reference, and I now had a goal to focus on. So based off of my lab results, I went strict gluten-free. So even though I was avoiding gluten, so wheat products, and I also was mostly dairy-free, my lab results showed that I was still reacting to some proteins found in wheat or gluten-like products that were causing my body to have a reaction. So I went strict gluten-free. So I avoided almost all grains. I was very mindful about eating out. I was very mindful about how I prepped and prepared my food at home. And I also went strict dairy-free. So all dairy products I completely avoided. And this was very, very important for healing my gut at the time, because wheat products, gluten, dairy can be so hard to digest, and because I had no stomach acid, I had that H. pylori, I could not break down these foods properly, and it was causing a lot of inflammation on my gut that was already struggling. So I focused on rebuilding my gut and supporting my digestion. I started addressing the stress in my life, which is really important. So looking at what I was doing for work, trying to eliminate as much stress as I could that I had control over was really important. Resting, having more downtime. I really focused on nourishment. So not just cutting out gluten and dairy, but incorporating as much healing food as I possibly could. So I did a lot of whole foods. I stopped drinking like lots of raw smoothies and eating raw salads. So it was cooked foods, bone broths, just lots of healing, nutrient-dense foods. And then looking at all my lifestyle habits. So I stopped trying to chase really quick fixes, which is really important. So outside of following the strict gluten-free and dairy-free diet and addressing factors in my life like the stress and my daily habits, I also started to tackle the H. pylori, which I would have had no idea that H. pylori was what was contributing to the digestive issues I had if I had not tested and had the GI map done. And so I took a special product geared specifically towards the H. pylori. It's a tea called Matula tea. I started supporting my microbiome. I also started taking digestive enzymes with every single meal and snack. This really helped me break down and absorb my food, but without HCl, so without hydrochloric acid, because when you have H. pylori, if you take an enzyme that has HCl, hydrochloric acid in it, it can really aggravate that. So you want to be really mindful of that, which is something I did. And then outside of that, just really focused on healing my immune system of my gut. So all the products I took specifically really helped that. And over time, my energy returned, my digestion improved, my skin cleared, and I finally felt like myself again. And this took time. This experience changed everything for me. This experience of realizing that there is a reason why I felt the way I felt, that I could address what was going on through diet, lifestyle, but also specific supplements, and that I could feel like myself again. If I could do it all over again, I'm going to tell you exactly what I would do. I would have started with functional testing first, especially given I had so many symptoms, all of those gut symptoms, bloating, stomach pain, nausea, reacting to foods, and the trouble sleeping, and the hormonal imbalances, and the cystic acne. I would have dove into and pursued functional lab testing as soon as I found out about it, versus it being something that I came across and it was a last resort. Like I tried everything and now I'm going to do the functional testing. Because if I had the opportunity to run functional lab testing at the beginning, I would have gained so much clarity, insight, and had so much information that I could apply to my life, versus trying all these diets and trends and health hacks and supplements and products. It feels like you're shooting arrows at a target blindfolded. I would also just eliminate strictly gluten and dairy, but with the goal of it being a temporary diet. So not a long-term diet, which I could probably talk about this in another video. But I definitely followed a really strict diet for far too long. But if I could do all it over again, functional lab testing, strict gluten and dairy free, especially with the gut symptoms until they resolved. And I would have incorporated digestive enzymes, but without HCl, based on lab testing. And then incorporate as many healing foods and gut supporting supplements, like build up the immune system of the gut, versus jumping on. I was taking a lot of probiotics, and that really wasn't helping my gut, which it was supposed to. So functional lab testing first would have really helped me be much more efficient and much more effective with my energy and time. And so that's why I became an FDNP. So others, like maybe you listening, don't have to spend years guessing like I did, years trying so many things. It's exhausting, it's discouraging, and you feel like it's all in your head and you feel like nobody gets it. And so now I get to help clients uncover what's really going on inside their bodies so that they can take action and finally feel better. Okay, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. I am an open book. I love chatting with you all. I would love to help you. If you want to learn more, there are some videos linked below that will tell you everything you need to know. And I'm so excited to support you along your health journey, and I'll see you in the next one.